having sex put me into labor? The bottom line up front is no. Stick around and I'll tell you why. For decades, one of the presumed treatments for either miscarriage or preterm labor was avoidance of sexual intercourse and/or orgasm. The first edition of Williams Obstetrics says, quote, "If past experience has shown that the patient has an irritable uterus and is predisposed to abort upon the slightest provocation, coitus should be interdicted during pregnancy, and the patient be cautioned against overexertion and encouraged to lead a careful, well-ordered existence. Moreover, she should be instructed to take to her bed immediately upon the appearance of any untoward symptoms." Essentially, nothing in that paragraph is true. We can talk about bed rest at another time, but we know that bed rest does not decrease the risk of miscarriage. As far as sex, the implication of the paragraph is that orgasm, which is accompanied by uterine contractions, can cause miscarriage and preterm labor for women who are, in Williams's words, predisposed to orgasms. Much of the advice given to women today by obstetricians and midwives follows a long heritage of such misogynistic tropes, which paint women as weak vessels for carrying babies and place the blame for failure at their feet. If a woman has a miscarriage or a preterm birth, it must have been related to her insatiable desire for sex or just her overall weakness and inability to lie in bed for 9 months. It's unfortunate that such nonsense persists, and in fact is quite common throughout obstetrics. Later, as we understood the role of prostaglandins for induction of labor and discovered prostaglandins in semen, a false logic for such silly statements was back-constructed, which attributed the onset of labor to the prostaglandins in the semen. Oftentimes, this false belief is found in very benign-sounding recommendations, such as when a pregnant woman at term asks for advice about how to get things started, and she's told to have sex and that the prostaglandins will help to ripen her cervix. But if that's true, then it should follow that women prior to full term should never have sex. But what does the science say? A 2007 study randomized women to sex versus no sex to see if this would reduce the need for induction, increase the rate of spontaneous labor, affect the rate of cesarean delivery, or other important obstetric outcomes. None of those outcomes compared were any different, though the intervention group did have more sex and more orgasms. The control group also had orgasms, and doctors should remember that piece of information when they advise against women having sex or having orgasms in order to prevent miscarriage or preterm labor. I remember once a patient who was devastated that she kept having orgasms in her sleep during dreams, and she was worried that this was going to cause her to lose her baby because of nonsense advice like this. A 2002 survey of folk beliefs about labor onset among women found that 47% of women believe that having sex would bring on labor. We'll talk about the other 9 beliefs in a later video. But the bottom line is, sex does not cause labor or miscarriage. Such folk beliefs can influence how science is interpreted and conducted, though. In this case, older literature, simply based on retrospective questionnaires, seemed to imply that sex did lead to labor. But those sorts of studies are problematic and rarely lead to scientifically sound, evidenced conclusions. One good randomized trial can trump 100 years of anecdotal nonsense. Also, we have to be careful to avoid narrative fallacies, such as prostaglandins cause labor, therefore semen causes labor. In this case, dosages matter. The average amount of ejaculate contains less than 10 micrograms of PGF2 alpha, a type of prostaglandin that's been studied for possible benefit for induction of labor in humans. The human studies actually found that it wasn't very effective at all and had few benefits. We moved beyond routinely using it decades ago. But in one study from 1979 that found that it wasn't very effective, they used a dose of 25 milligrams. That's 2,500 times the amount of prostaglandins contained in semen, and it still wasn't effective. So have sex while you're pregnant, don't feel guilty about it, and remember that repeating old lies can be harmful.